afternoon. I'm Kevin Busey. I'm the Minister of Universal Spirit, and I welcome you here this afternoon. And on behalf of Arvel, Ken's wife, and on behalf of his two children, Gigi and Dion, I welcome you to the celebration of life for Ken Hill. So welcome. This center is a center that both Ken and Arvel for many years called their spiritual home. So I welcome you. I invite you to make yourself at home while you're here. A couple brief housekeeping issues. Right behind you are bathrooms. So if you need to use the bathroom. The second thing is at the end of the gathering, Arvel, we're having an event catered. So people on this side, I'm going to ask you to move on this side because we're going to set up tables here. So do that. And welcome all of you who join us online. We have a good online presence. So we welcome you as well. So I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath. Just breathe right into your body. Just bring yourself here. So we gather when we celebrate, do celebrations of life, we really gather for three reasons. The first is really in our coming together, we assist in sharing our grief with each other, and that assists us in our own grief. There's something about coming together that assists us in holding grief. Arvel was telling me just before the service she was so glad that her family was here today. The gathering of family helps her in her grief. So we gather to support each other in this loss. The second reason we come together is to celebrate a life well lived. So we're celebrating a life well lived. And I have to tell you, I'm impressed with the many press articles that were written about Ken that are right over there. He made quite a splash in the papers over the years. Most of us will just have an obit, right? But Ken has quite a number of articles. So we celebrate and we hear from family members about the kind of man he was and the kind of man we celebrate. And the third reason we gather for celebrations of life is to remind ourselves that life is forever. That's something that Ken believed, and it's now something that Ken experiences. That life is forever. So we gather to remind ourselves of that even though his physical presence is not here, we could certainly feel his presence. And that his presence, his soul, lives on. So we come to remind ourselves of that. So I'm going to invite up his grandson, JJ, along with his wife, Alondra, and baby Luna. We have a tradition at our center that on Christmas Eve we light a candle to remind us of the divine presence within each one of us. So we do that on Christmas Eve. And then whenever one of our members or congregants of our community make their transition, we light the candle again during that service to remind ourselves of the eternal flame, the divine light that is within Ken. So we'll have them come up to light the candle, grandson and great-granddaughter, right? To remind us that Ken's soul lives forever. She actually helped. Luna actually helped. Is that the only great-grandchild? Oh, Ken has 6 great-grandkids, and that's the not the final, but the most recent. Most recent. Yeah, not the final. So Arvel asked me to read a reading called Farewell, My Friends. It was beautiful as long as it lasted. The journey of my life, I have no regrets whatsoever, save the pain I'll leave behind. Those dear hearts who love and care. And the strings pulling at the heart and soul, the strong arms that held me up when my strength let me down. At every turn of my life, I came across good friends, friends who stood by me, even when time raced me by. Farewell, my friends. I smile and I bid you goodbye. No shed, no tears, for I need them not. All I need is your smile. If you feel sad, do think of me, for that's what I'll like. When you live in the hearts of those you love, remember then, you will never die. So I'm inviting up a good friend of Ken's and Arvell's, Andy Anderson.
Life has taught me this, every day is new. And if anything is true, all that matters when we're through is how we love. Faced with what we lack, some things fall apart, but from the ashes new dreams start. All that matters to the heart is how we love. How we love. How we love. From the smallest act of kindness, in a word, a smile, a touch. In spite of our mistakes, chances come again. If we lose or if we win, all that matters in the end is how we love. How we love, how we love. I will not forget your humor that I laughed at oh so much. Sometimes we forget, trying to be so strong in this world of right and wrong. All that matters when we're gone, all that mattered all along, all we have that carries on is how we
Sandy and Nathan. Thank you. Thank you. Anything you want me to share about that song? So Arvell was saying she heard this song the first time at her 80th birthday, and every time she saw these guys together, they both asked them to play them. So I want to introduce family. I want to do that. So with the first row stand, we've got the sons of Arvell and grandson of Arvell. So if you guys turn around and see everyone. And then Gigi and Dion, they're daughters of Ken's daughters. And then who else would like to stand and be introduced? That's about as far as husband Greg. There's husband Greg. Great. Okay, thank you. Thank you, yeah. And you guys didn't need to sit down because I'm inviting up Ken's daughters, Gigi and Dion, to deliver the eulogy. This.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. You put your water there?
My Kleenex.
Just move right on in.
Is this you? There you go. Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah, I can hear myself. Thank you to everybody who came today and for everyone that's been helping with this. My dad was born in Long Beach. His name was Kenneth Gerald Hill, but he was called Jerry because his brothers, Jack and Joe, it just made sense, Jack, Joe, and Jerry. But he changed it to Kenneth later on. He was born in Long Beach and they moved to Chico. My grandfather worked for a newspaper, and so my dad went to Chico State University, and he wanted to be an educator, and he had this huge career in education, and I'm really proud of him. We finally left and went to Pacifica, where Dion was born. And I was trying to figure out how do I summarize this whole life that I've had with this wonderful man. I can't just talk about his history, and all these different recollections come up, so I had to just pick a few. And the first one, the really big one, talked about my dad's moral character. When we first moved to Pacifica, I think I was about 4 or 5, and my sister Aileen, and he took us to a drugstore and purchased something, and I don't know if we asked for a candy bar or not, but they were right at the level of taking, and we just took them and didn't tell my dad. And he was driving, and all of a sudden there's the rustling of paper as we decide to eat. And he's like, "What is that? What are you doing?" And he saw that we were eating candy. He turned around, turned the car around, made a U-turn, went back to the drugstore and brought us up and said, "My daughters took this candy and they didn't realize that you have to pay for it." And that was our lesson, like, okay, lesson number 1. I'd like to say, "Thou shalt not steal," but it was more, "Thou shalt not make Dad upset," because he's very disappointed. Dad worked his way up. He started out as a teacher, and then he became a principal. And I was in 4th grade, and he happened to be the principal of my school. And you'd think that I would have gotten a really good treatment, but I think I got the meanest teacher in the school. Her name was, I won't give her whole name, but Mrs. B, and she was a B, so it's kind of appropriate. And I would talk to Dad, and being the consummate professional that he was, I'd say, "She's really mean. I don't like her." I was hoping he'd switch, but I guess he didn't think that was a good lesson to me, and he said, "I want you to just realize that there are going to be difficult people in your life, and you must learn to adapt that way. That's how we grow." But I found out later he didn't really agree with the way she taught either. But he had to deal with that later, and I think he was more of a kinder, gentler teacher, and she was very strict. What is it about 4th grade teachers? And that was not a very good year for me because one of my other recollections was that we went to a church picnic and my friends and I went down to a creek and some boys had thrown rocks at this beehive and all of a sudden the swarm of bees came down and we running to my dad. Ah! And he just slowly picked all these bees out of my hair and I thought, wow, he's my Superman because he was taking care of me. And I found out later that he had gotten stung 3 or 4 times and I never even knew it. So Dad moved up. He became director of personnel. And then he went to San Francisco State and he taught future educators and he was so proud of the impact that he made on people. He felt like he instilled good values and he wanted to see, do you mind opening this? My lips are getting dry. Thanks. He wanted to instill values and morals that he felt, and principles that he felt were really good in education. Thank you. So they had a program there to send people to West Africa, Monrovia, Liberia Consolidated School System. And he announced one day that we were all going to go to Africa. And we were like, no, we can't go, Dad, we can't go. It's just too hard. Because we didn't want to leave all our friends. And boy, I look at that now as being one of the biggest milestones of my life, what that taught me as, I know this is hard to believe, but I was a dorky 12-year-old. And I had just left my trolls and my Barbies. And I learned a lot of things, and I never, that was like the best thing that could have ever happened to us. Dion was a lot younger, but the biggest and probably the sweetest memory I have took place in Liberia because it was a weird, kind of a precocious social scene. In the first week we got there, I get this note from some guy named Randy. He said, will you go study with me? And I'm like, what? I didn't even know what to do, and I was freaking out, and I was anxious because I wasn't ready for that. And close to that time, I remember sitting on my dad. This is where I'm going to try not to cry. I was sitting on my dad's lap and just crying and said, I'm not ready for this. I'm not ready. Maybe it's about leaving your dad on some level. I don't know. Maybe it's about moving on or growing up. But my dad just talked about how everything comes in time, and it's all going to work out. And just be myself and don't do anything that I don't feel comfortable doing. And that, the words, there were a lot of good words, but what resonates with me more than anything was that he was so present and he got me. And I just felt like he was really there for me and protected me. And it's a really good memory. Okay. Now, we went back from Africa to Redwood City, and then he became a superintendent. And then he taught at Stanford after that, and so he was quite the educated person, and I think he was so proud of that. And I'm just going to read this one part because you saw the newspaper articles when he retired, somebody put that together. And he stated that Dr. Hill, he was very proud of his doctorate degree. Dr. Hill had a prevailing sense of teamwork. He was a visionary, he had skilled leadership. He was held with high regard among educators, locally, statewide, and nationally. I'm like, whoa, nationally, because he did publish articles and stuff. And I think that he had a high degree of what I call social intelligence. People just really liked him. And now, as I got older, I would rely on him very much. I'm almost done, everybody. I would rely on him just for his words of wisdom and his perspective on life. And one thing that stuck with me was whenever I had issues, I would call him and I would be so upset. It was like so dramatic. There was something going on, and he goes, I just read this whole book, and I don't even know the author anymore or anything, but just remember, when the world falls around you and it just feels like you're disintegrating, you have to reintegrate at a higher level. And that's always stuck with me. Thank you. That's beautiful. So how fortunate I was to have a father who was kind and gentle and loving, because sometimes I've talked to friends who didn't have that, and that we had him for as long as we had. And I'll just miss looking into those beautiful eyes of his and telling him I love him and him telling me he loves me back. Whew. Okay, I made it. Sorry, dear.
You're going to leave me? You
Yeah,
said
I'm-
you're going to stay with me.
I'll stay with you.
I stayed with you. All right. Well, we got to spend some great time with Dad in the last couple of weeks, and he was very humble growing up. I got to say, I had no clue that stuff was going on. He didn't tell us anything, and here he was who he was. But I got to learn firsthand why he was so proud, because in his past weeks he talked about his career that Gerald just outlined, and he's very proud, and I was so proud of him for admitting it, because he didn't to us growing up. But you know, going to schools in the district that your dad is the superintendent of is kind of a blessing and a curse, because you're like, you have to be on good behavior. But then my lifelong friend Laura, who became a teacher in his district, just talked about how well respected he was, which is high praise coming from the teachers in the district when you're usually negotiating opposite them. So I'm like, you know what, he's got something, and I think I want it. And so I started applying what I observed, and the qualities I saw that I tried to lead with in my career was that he was always acting with integrity. He talked about fairness. He talked about being articulate, and he definitely assessed all viewpoints, which is also another curse, because I'm really slow to decision making now, because I'm always taking in every viewpoint and I don't know which is the right decision. So he gave me that. Thanks, Dad. But as far back as me being a child, which is 10 years ago, but no, I'm sorry, about 60 years ago, I'll say, he always talked about embracing diversity, and he taught me that it's in our very core. And I'm just so proud of that you know, I do my best, and we all do our best to embrace diversity. And so that was a really great lesson that he modeled for us. Another couple memories I have is that he wrote a letter to his 3 daughters, and he said, he wrote, "He's uncommonly happy." I'm like, what a gift he gave us for today, right? I mean, we're honoring a man and celebrating his life who was uncommonly happy. And so this is joy, you know? And he tried, and Arvell taught us a lot about bringing joy in, and taught him a lot about joy too. And then later, I got a birthday card from him, and he's like, you know, he was writing, "It's really hard to explain the love I feel for you." But by then I had finally had my son, Gabriel. And he's like, "You girls should picture the love that you have for your children, and that's how I feel for you." And I'm like, but you know, I feel really lucky, because few people, not few, but how wonderful it is to feel the same way about a parent, you know, and to feel that same immense love back. And so I feel really honored to lucky to have that feeling. And then he started talking about his grandsons, and he was so proud of his grandsons. And the thing he said to us was that he feels really good with what he observed, because he's leaving knowing that they're going to thrive and they're positive influences. So that was really cool to hear. And one of the things that I recall observing when Aileen or Gerald would talk about raising their sons, and I hadn't quite experienced some of that yet, he would talk about, you know what's most important in your kids is kindness. Because if your kids are nice and if they're well-liked, they're going to thrive, because they'll build a community, they'll build a network, and there's people going to take care of them and watch out for them. And I think that we all succeeded in that. And so his kindness message is so ingrained in my life. It's every core of being that I can share with anybody, and I feel like our kids have that too. So it's really cool. Then the positive force Arvell comes in. And oh my gosh, this was so fun having a bright spark in our family that wasn't always quite sparky, you know, so it's really fun. And I was working in Scotland at the time when they bought their house in Hawaii. Like, who gets to go on home leave from Scotland and say they're going to Hawaii to visit their mom and dad? You know, so I was like, I was cool stuff that day. I was like, I'm going to Hawaii. So that was a really fun, and we had such great times in Hawaii, and we have great times in San Diego too. And Dad talked about how positive the family you brought into his life have been such joys for him as well. He talked about that quite a bit. So he did leave us saying that he is happy that he had the opportunity to share his humor, knowledge, and experience with so many people. And 93 years, he sure did. But you know, Dad had a sense of humor. And I'm going to try to model Bob a little here because he loved Bob's jokes and he laughed so hard when Bob made a joke. And so this was something he kept saying at the end, and I didn't always laugh, but I don't always, but Dad always laughed at Bob's jokes, so we'll go with that. Let's just leave it at that. So one of the things he said is that, you know, I was taught to respect my elders. But you know what? I look around, and I don't see any elders above me anymore. So, and here's Sharon.
Thank you so much for sharing with us what a great dad your father was. So thank you. Thank you. I want to acknowledge the Bob joke. So every Sunday morning, Bob is our announcer on Sunday mornings, and he has a dad joke. And so that's what the reference to that was. So now I'm introducing a very good friend of the family, Sharon, who was actually the one that introduced the two of you to each other, right, Arvell? Yeah, she made this all happen. Okay, Sharon, come on down. Yeah.
Hello. Ken Hill was my husband's best friend for 62 years, until Albert died 2 years ago. In Ken's own words at my husband's memorial, quote, "We shared things that we wouldn't share with anyone else, not even our wives. And we had each other's back. And there was nothing they wouldn't do to help each other in a pinch." Ken proved that many times. And when Albert married me 42 years ago, he extended that blanket of care and affection to me as well. Ken was complicated. He was incredibly smart, and he loved rational discussion, or what he considered rational discussion. His mind, like my husband's, was always searching for answers and ideas. He read voraciously all kinds of books, philosophical, religion, fiction, biographies. He enjoyed debating political points and theories, although he always knew where he stood on a candidate or policy, and that rarely changed. As the girls said, he was kind and he was humble. Very few in his later years in San Diego, having come from Northern California, knew about his many years as superintendent of Redwood City, a district of 8,600 students in 16 schools, or that he served in the elected position as a member of the San Mateo County Board of Education and as a full professor at Stanford University. My husband and I were blessed to share with Ken times of great triumph and happiness, but also times of immeasurable pain. We were invited to stay with him and his second wife, Wilda Gardella Hill, for Ken's 50th blowout birthday party. But we were also at the hospital when Wilda was operated on for stage 4 ovarian cancer. Ken never wavered. He devoted his life at that time to caring for Wilda, He and his wonderful daughters did everything in their power to ease her suffering. In time, on one of Ken's visits to see us, we took him to Top of the Cove, where Christy Rickard, whom many of you know, was playing. And it happened that our friend Arvel Cortez was there. And as luck would have it, Ken happened to be seated right next to her. When we left the club, he couldn't stop talking about her. And Albert said, "Well, why don't the four of us go to dinner?" That was it. Neither of them ever looked at anyone else. It's not for me to discuss the love affair that lasted 17 years. But I can say that they thrived on their ability to learn from one another, and that every day that Ken looked forward to was premised on the fact that he would see Arvel, that they would keep exploring life together. Ken was an explorer to the end, and as he explores his new reality, we pray for his enlightenment and peace.
So I want to share, I had a special connection with Ken that I had never had with anyone else. I knew Ken was a great reader, and so over the time that he and Arvel were with us, 2 different times I asked him what he was reading, and it was the same book that I was reading. So I just felt that was a kind of a special connection. And I do want to say that to have a couple, Arvel and Ken, as generous and as kind and as intelligent you are, and to have you call our community your spiritual home has over the years meant so much to me. Meant so much to me. So we're going to ask Nathan and Andy to come on back.
In whatever time we have, for as long as we are living, we can face whatever comes. If we face it now as one, I could make it on my own. Let me know that I don't have to. No one really wants to be alone. In whatever time we have, if at times we are afraid with so little to believe in, it's all right to feel afraid. I will hold you in the dark. All we know for sure is this: though the world could end tomorrow, you and I will be together in whatever time. In whatever time we have, for as long as we are living, your shield. No one really wants to be alone in whatever time we have. There are times I've been afraid in a world that's so uncertain. Then I feel your hand in mine, and there's courage in my heart. We could live 100 years, or the world could end tomorrow, but we know we'll be together in whatever time. From this day forward, nights won't seem so black. From this day forward, we will never look back in whatever time we have. We will make the most of time, and at least we'll be together in whatever time we have.
So Arvel asked me to read the second reading, and it's from the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita is a Hindu scripture that tells the story of enlightenment. From the Bhagavad Gita. The soul can never be cut into pieces by any weapon, nor can it be burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind. This individual soul is unbreakable and can neither be buried or dried. It is everlasting, all pervasive, unchanging, immutable, and eternal, all at the same time. It is said that the soul is invisible, inconceivable, and unchangeable. Know this: you shall not grieve the body. So I'm going to take us on a little process of goodbye. So I'm going to invite you, if you would like to close your eyes, to put your feet on the floor. I'm going to take you on a little journey here this afternoon. There's an opportunity to say goodbye. So take a deep breath right into your heart. Just right where you are, feel safe. And picture yourself in nature. Maybe it's a place you've been or simply created in your imagination. So imagine yourself in the midst of this nature, in this beautiful place. And as you look out into the distance, you see that someone is approaching you. And as this person starts to get closer, you see that it's Ken. That he's come to see you. And he looks at you with those deep, intense eyes. And he greets you the way he's always greeted you. And he shares with you anything that might have been left unsaid. So let him speak to you now. And as he's wrapping up, I invite you to take a deep breath. And now it's your turn. You get to tell Ken whatever has been left unsaid between the two of you. And you notice now that Ken's getting ready to leave. So the two of you embrace. And he turns to walk away. And you watch him move into the distance. His body getting smaller. And to the degree that you're able, say goodbye. And know that you could come back here to this very spot and communicate with Ken. So just take a deep breath and bring your awareness back to the room. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and we welcome up Gina Walker, the music director of Universal Spirit Center and good friend of Ken.
Good afternoon. I'm so honored to be in this space and to celebrate with the family. And Ken and Norvell asked me to do a prayer. He said, Ken, love my prayers. I love that. And then I will close out with a song. So as we are in this space right now with our hearts wide open, let's take that space and let's give thanks. We give thanks for the man that Ken was and is. Thanks for the father, for the teacher, for the divine husband, for the loving presence that he is and was and is always right there in that part of your heart. So we thank you for this time, Ken. We thank you for sharing your beautiful light and love with us. And know that any time you can reach him right there in your heart. You will feel his joy, his laughter, his presence, and his knowledge. For we know that life is eternal, and in this divine space of eternalness, we give thanks and praise for the grace that is Ken that is the life of God. So we lift up our hearts. We lift up our hearts with love. And we release this loving presence of the physical and know that the divine vibrational light of Ken is always with us. And so it is. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a soul like me. I was lost, oh, but now I'm found. Was blind, oh, but now I see. 'Twas grace